So, we got our hook in the vise. We're going to do the same sort of thing here. I'm going to wrap at the head. Close off that gap in the hook. And then I'm going to come back halfway down the shank. And then go back halfway. Let the thread hang. So, this is calf tail. It's got black on it, but I'm not going to use the black. So I'm going to take cut a little slip of material out of this calf tail. That is, if I bunch it up real good, it's going to be maybe half the gap of the hook. You don't want too much, because then it gets awful tough to keep the body slender. But you don't want too little, or the wing looks a little sparse. So I'm going to cut this off nice and close to the calf. So, as Carolyn Sell says on the Fly Tying Angler's Art, you got to get rid of the fuzzies.
Yeah, can't have the fuzzies.
Can't have the fuzzies. What does Leroy call them? Fluff? I don't know. The fibers, short fibers, but she calls them fuzzies, and he gives you the gears about it every time. So that's probably about right in terms of the amount. Now, here's where I get to use one of my prized possessions. When Robin Sherabin passed away, his wife sold off a bunch of his stuff, and one of the things I eagerly grabbed was his hair stackers. So I have two of Roman's hair stackers, and every time I use it, I think of Roman. He was a great friend of the club, a wonderful fly fisherman, and great guy, all-around guy. Now, I'm going to have to whack this pretty good, because these calf tails don't stack up as nicely. What I'm trying to do here is even up the tips of that material. There's still going to be a little bit in variation in length, but that's some of those long ones I'm going to pull out of there. I'll get some of the real long ones out of there. Just the bulk of it. Okay, that's about even. So the same thing again, measure shank length, and because I got some long mallards out there, I'm going to get rid of them. But that's about right. Set it down on the hook, and this again is very important, to get a loose wrap around between those fingers and pull up and squeeze the hook nice and tight, or this material will, because it's slippery, it will wrap around the hook like crazy. So now he's on there. Yeah, I just need to, that looks a little short, so because these are slippery, I can now just tease that wing forward a little bit through the wraps. A little better. Cinch it down. Once again, I'm going to hold this up at that 45 angle, trim parallel to the hook shank, and I end up with a bit of a tapered body. I'm going to fasten that down. Then pull these fibers up again. Nice and. Now, one of the nice things about finishing your whip finish around the post is you can move that wing a little closer to the eye of the hook, because you don't have to leave room to wrap that hackle off or finish the head off. So once again, around the post. And that's one of the things that happens. You pull too hard, it slips off the top of the wing. Now you need to apply a little more attention to this, because this material is a little stiffer, doesn't compact as nice. So once we get her started, it usually goes pretty good. And again, a little more than eye width up that post. Just make sure it's good and solid. Okay, back to the back. Is that mine? Hmm? Yeah, it's probably my wife calling to tell me something about the kitchen. I've been going through kitchen renovations for the last 6 weeks, and it looks like we're going to move out of the basement kitchen back in my workshop, back into the regular kitchen this weekend. Yay! We got the cooktop back in operation, and my first comment today was, hooray, we finally get to have spaghetti for the first time in 6 weeks. So again, golden pheasant crest, measured a little bit longer than the shank of the hook. We're going to tie them back in at the back. And I'm not going to bother spreading these out because I want the colors to show a bit, so we want to keep them reasonably dense. And then wrap them up here. Now, this was another one that I learned from Leroy, watching Leroy do his thing. Actually, it was Carolyn. Very interesting program to watch on a Saturday morning. The reason I get up Saturday morning is not to watch Leroy and Carolyn, although I love to watch them banter. And it's all reruns from several years ago. But Soccer Saturday is on immediately after. And this weekend is the big one. It's Barcelona and Man United.
You got me excited.
Yeah, this is Euro.
They're at noon, right? Because they start in Europe.
Yeah, it's Euro. Yeah, it's the big European Champions League final, and it's Massey, who is one of the best soccer players I've ever seen. He's just phenomenal against Man United, and it should be a really good game to watch. So I'm tying peacock herl in. I'm taking them right to the back. And then I'm going to come forward back to where I was before. And this is not the way normally we tie these things, but I'm going to tie in my red floss. Now, the traditional pattern, you use Pearsall silk, which is, by golly, I got some. I've had that for about 30 years. And one of the reasons you use Pearsall's is because it changes color differently in the water from what regular acetate floss is. It goes darker. It goes almost brown. So now I'm going to take my peacock herl, and I'm going to spin it up into a little bit of a rope here. And before I wrap it, I'm going to take my thread forward to where I'm going to put the thorax. I'm going to leave the thread hang there. Then I go and I wrap my back of the fly, being careful not to break all this peacock herl on the hook point, which is a challenge in and of itself. And I'm wrapping a little bit forward over that floss, so I get a nice little bump of peacock herl at the back. Then I'm going to bring the peacock herl forward with my right hand, and I'm going to wrap my first wrap of floss over top of the peacock herl. Right in place. I'm not going to tie it off with thread. And then I'm going to use the floss to bind the peacock herl down over the middle of the body till I get to where I want the width of that middle of the body, and then I'll tie it off with thread. So that saves me an operation. I don't have to tie out and tie in the peacock herl. I can just bind it down with the floss. And then I can bring my thread forward of the post, and once again I'm going to twist this into a rope. I'm going to wrap forward. I'm going to make a nice bump in behind. I'm going to make a nice bump in front. So I now have a thorax, and I'm going to bring that thread back over behind the post and tie off that peacock herl right behind the post. Leave my thread hang. There we go. So that was an interesting way of building the body on the Royal Wulff. So, where is it here? Now for hackle. This one's probably a little on the small side, but I'm going to use this one. This is more of a gray than it is a furnace, but it'll work. Once again, I'm going to prepare that hackle stem with a good 1/4 to 3/8 inch of bare stem. And with the intense colored, I'll do it your way. I'll put the intense colored part facing the hook. And I'll hold it up in there and get 2 or 3.
It makes a difference whether you put it upside or down.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Those things pointing down or pointing up, the fly is going to be just this tiny little bit higher in the
Right.
water or lower.
Well,
It's color. It's what do they see?
Down, it makes like the dainty feet run the water.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is if you go down that slippery slope, you got to count to make sure there are no more than 6, 3 on each side.
Yeah, exactly.
You gotta make sure there's only 3
Yeah.
tails or 2.
Because you know, if it's 5 or 7, the trout will get confused. This is, you got it right. There's just a bunch of legs there. It's like, oh well, whatever. It's just food.
Yeah. And of course, we all can't figure out how trout miss this great big whacking piece of wire sticking out of the bottom of the hook, if they're that picky. However, once again, I've got that a little bit of stem. I pulled it down a little bit, so there's a little bit of stem showing, so that I bring the stem up to the top of the post, and then I start wrapping down. If I don't leave that bit of stem, what happens is the first wrap of hackle, the fibers go all over the darn place, instead of sticking straight out at nice right angles.
Dave, how do you handle it if you're doing a double hackle or 2 different colors?
You would tie them both in
At the same time?
At the same time, and you'd wrap one up and then wrap it down and then wrap the other up, the stem up through and then down. And again, with the second one, you might even want a little longer stem because you want that first couple of wraps to go through before the hackle fibers start trapping each other. So again, then on the near side, we're going to come up with our hackle, with our thread. We're going to go over and under. Again, making sure the thread does the same thing as the hackle fibers did when you were wrapping, which is sort of over the shank and then down below. Finish it off on the far side. Come in here and actually I should be able to saw that off against my, no, it's not going to come. Sometimes the hackle stem is soft enough, you just put the edge of the scissors in there and it's gone. There we go. Now this time I'm going to try to do it without turning the hook. It's a little trickier, but I've been doing this long enough, I should be able to do it without ruining things. So we're in there, and there's your Royal Wulff. Hackle, parachute style.